Hello, everyone. I'm not even going to start moving this. I really want to. I really, really, really want to. But I'm only going to do that if it gets in the way at all, like if there's stuff on the screen. I make no promises, though. Okay. Before we get started, this is part 2, by the way. Battle of Ankara, 1402. I probably have screwed that up already. A clash of the two biggest conquerors of their time. This is Mr. Timur. Yep, that's him. If you could go ahead and say, watch this. If you could do this for me right there, yay! If you could click that thumbs up for me, that helps tremendously. Subscribe if you'd like to. And you can donate to the channel through the thanks button. You can request a video. If you do, your name will be sponsoring the video. You can still request. This was a request. I thank you for the request. You don't get any. You're paying for the recognition and the sponsoring and the thanks and all that stuff. You just get the normal thanks here. You just get the, oh, come on, stupid. What are you doing? You're embarrassing me. Okay. The blanket. Okay, let's get into the video. This is part 2. We're going to stop it at 33 minutes. I don't know.
Moreover, keeping his emirs close to him on the march prevented them from returning to their homelands and stirring up revolts. Meanwhile, Bayezid, failing to persuade John to surrender the keys to Constantinople, left the siege unattended. He headed east to retake Sivas and capture Erzincan. This campaign, as well as Timur's invasion of Georgia, would be completed by late autumn of 1401. And as the year drew to a close, both leaders prepared for the inevitable battle. In early 1402, Timur marched his troops out of winter quarters towards the Ottoman border. His emirs, however, advised him against the campaign, arguing that the men were weary after spending 3 years on the march. Moreover, the emirs feared Bayezid's leadership on the battlefield and the resources readily available to him in Anatolia. Timur remained undeterred. However, he knew that Bayezid was far more formidable than any opponent he had faced before. Timur perhaps secretly viewed Bayezid as his equal. Thus, he sent word to his grandson Muhammad in Samarkand, ordering him to bring fresh troops and join him in Anatolia. According to medieval accounts, over the next 2 months the Timurid army swelled up to 140,000, though between 30 and 50% of these were likely camp followers, servants, and slaves. By the spring of 1402, Bayezid massed his own army of some 85,000 troops and camp followers at Basra, in preparation for a march east to meet the invaders. 2 massive columns crossed the northeastern Ottoman border. One marched along the Trebizond border. The main body, commanded by Timur, advanced through Erzurum and towards Erzincan. Splitting his forces made it possible to move faster through enemy territory. The plan was for the columns to converge on Sivas. Meanwhile, Bayezid's army slowly converged just east of Ankara. By this time, the Timurids reached Sivas, where they were met by Ottoman envoys. Timur received the Ottoman delegation, but as soon as the dialogue started, he rejected their gift, thereby confirming he did not wish to negotiate a truce. Both parties promptly insisted on their demands, glorifying the strengths of their respective armies in an effort to intimidate each other. Timur listed the many contingents from across his empire. Banners from the Asian steppe, Persia, India, Georgia, and other leaders loyal to him. Tens of thousands of feared horse archers, contingents of heavy cavalry in plate or mail, a large contingent of elephants from India, a terrifying shock weapon. Timur was confident that this impressive list would intimidate the Ottomans. But the Ottoman envoys fired back, listing all the great men loyal to Bayezid, professional infantry at the core of his army, armoured feudal Sipahi cavalry. From the Balkans, the heavily armoured Serbian cavalry, commanded by Stefan Lazarevic, a substantial infantry contingent led by the nobles from Bulgaria and northern Greece, mounted Kipchak Tatars recruited from Crimea, along with armoured Mamluk mercenary cavalry, and thousands of Turkic horsemen and infantry levied from across Anatolia. Once the two parties blew off steam...
Do you think that anyone ever knew that they had a military that had more soldiers? Now, I'm not saying this guarantees a win, but do you think that they ever knew I have more soldiers? So they got into this situation where, it's just a whip it out. If you're a guy, whip it out, put it on the table, it's a dick measuring kind of thing. Look how much we have. Blah, blah, blah. Do you think there's ever been one of these situations where the other side that knew they had more was like, oh, gee, we don't have close to that many people. Oh, wow, you've got all those. We've got like 5, maybe 9 archers. Oh my good, we have one guy who passes a shield around. Just completely underrates everything. Oh my gosh, you've got 200 archers? We've got 9. Oh, geez. You've got how many horsemen? Oh, we've got 4. We've got 4 people riding on a horse. That's completely just undersell it. And then come into, I could see somebody like Hannibal doing this, but come into a battle where you have your soldiers strategically set up. So when this main army comes in, they're kind of like, I don't think they were bluffing. They really don't have crap. And then that's when you start bringing your other people out, and they're kind of like, yep, I knew this was a bluff. I got the tingles, and I should have listened to it. But instead, I really did. I believed them. I wonder if that's, probably not as much. You're going to bluff and lie, but probably not as much about, undervaluing. I'm going to sneeze.
And the shouting match in the tent died down. It was clear that neither side would budge. If either Timur or Bayezid's envoys were impressed by the show of force on each side, they didn't show it. Though undoubtedly, neither had ever faced a foe of this strength. From Ankara, Bayezid advanced east to meet the invading menace, after receiving reports that Timur was ravaging the area around Sivas. The Sultan's advisors, however, urged that a defensive line be formed near Ankara to receive the attack, closer to their main supply lines. But it was not lost on the Ottoman Sultan that the forested hilly terrain in the Sivas region would put his majority infantry army at an advantage over the predominantly mounted Timurid force. He was eager to catch his opponent in Sivas. It was now late June, however, and the laborious march in the summer heat took its toll on the troops. About a week later, Timur suddenly moved his forces southwest after receiving reports that Bayezid was closing in, leaving a diversionary force behind to guard the rear. He too was aware that the terrain around Sivas did not favor him and wanted to avoid confronting Bayezid there. Timur marched along the banks of the Hales River, the route he used 2 years prior. His intention was to go around Bayezid and strike Kayseri. There he would stop to rest his troops and gather fodder for the horses, before continuing towards Ankara. Meanwhile, Bayezid had reached Tokat, just to the northwest of the city of Sivas. he clashed with what he thought was Timur's vanguard. Quickly brushing aside the token force, Ottoman scouts dispersed to look for signs of the enemy. Some 2 days later, they found tracks of an army moving towards the southwest. Shocked by the realization that the enemy was now behind him, the Ottoman Sultan faced about and went back the way he came. Timur commanded some 90,000 fighting men. Another 50,000 camp followers tended to the carts, pack animals, and siege weapons. This heavy reliance on the baggage train allowed him to move his massive army quickly through enemy territory without the need to stop to forage. Bayezid, meanwhile, could muster 60,000 troops, which were accompanied by around 20,000 camp followers. Timur's army was clearly the larger one, but not overwhelmingly so. The Sultan from Samarkand reached Ankara with little opposition and put the city to siege. Surveying the flat plain northeast of the city, Timur was satisfied that this is where he would fight Bayezid. By the 20th of July, the thunderbolt reached the battlefield. Both commanders were aware of each other's military prowess. Bayezid was concerned about Timur's expert ability in leading his mobile nomadic cavalry and horse archers. Timur, on the other hand, worried about Bayezid's tight control of his disciplined professional infantry and astute use of heavy cavalry. Both cautious, Timur deployed with his back to hilly terrain to avoid a potential ambush. Bayezid, meanwhile, anchored his right wing on a ridge and his left wing to the Chubuk stream to protect against flanking attacks.
I actually really like how cautiously respectful both of them are against the other. I can't tell you why, but it's just something about it that I just feel like what I'm about to witness is either going to be an all-out bloody affair where both sides, because I don't know who wins, where both sides lose so many that they just finally pull apart, or one side just cuts right through the other. I mean, it's pretty much both options, right? It's either a blowout or a tough battle. Good job, Kris. Dummy.
Center stood the Azep infantry, behind a screen of archers. Behind them were several thousand elite Janissary troops and Kapikulu Sipahi heavy cavalry, Bayezid's most trusted troops. The Sultan took command in the center, together with his sons Isa, Mustafa, and Musa, as well as his Grand Vizier, Chandarlizadeh Ali Pasha. On the right wing, Bayezid positioned the 5,000-strong Serbian contingent, commanded by his trusted vassal and brother-in-law, Prince Stefan Lazarevic. The Serbian heavy cavalry, clad in black armor, were the heaviest units on the field, famous throughout Europe for their proficiency in battle. Supporting them was the veteran Serbian infantry. Behind them were the Albanian mercenaries and volunteers. Kara Timurtaz Pasha commanded an Anatolian cavalry force alongside Lazarevic's Serbians, taking their place between them and the central front line. On the Ottoman left wing, the Sultan's son and heir Suleiman commanded the cavalry and infantry recruited from the Balkans, mainly from the recently conquered Bulgaria, along with several contingents from the Turkic beyliks of Anatolia. Behind them were the Kipchak Tatar mercenaries from Crimea. Finally, Bayezid's son Mehmet commanded the infantry reserve, which was bolstered with a force of Turkoman Kara Koyunlu cavalry. Crucial to the Sultan's plan was the subtle ridge that ran along his battle line. His plan was to use this defendable elevation to offset the numerical superiority of the enemy. On the other side of the battlefield, the Timurid vanguard was comprised of 32 Indian war elephants, which were supplied with early explosive devices, fueled by naphtha, a form of hideously damaging napalm. Combined with archers shooting from the boxes atop their backs, one can only imagine the psychological effect these gigantic monsters and the injuries they could inflict had on Bayezid's western troops. Timur next placed a vast screen of horse archers across his battle line, a standard tactic of nomadic armies. A camp was set up behind each wing, tasked with resupplying these riders with arrows, fresh horses, and other provisions during the battle. Timur's son, Miran Shah, commanded the right wing, composed of Chagatai horse archers, as well as armoured cavalry from India, Georgia, and some Mamluk mercenaries. To the left of them was a mix of cavalry from Central Asia and Persia. In the centre, Timur took charge of the elite armoured cavalry, along with mounted units from Samarkand and contingents of the Surbedari infantry. On the left wing, Timur's son Shah Rukh commanded a large contingent of Chagatai cavalry, joined by Anatolian Beys. Supporting them on their right were a mix of Armenian and Turkoman cavalry and footmen, as well as other units recruited from across the Middle East. Finally, Timur's grandson and heir, Muhammad Mirza, was placed in charge of the reserve cavalry force. The battle began about 10 a.m. with the general advance of Timur's army. The horse archers rode ahead, while the rest of the army lagged behind, allowing time for the mounted archers to soften the Ottoman line or bait them into charging into the open.
If you don't know what happens, put in the comment section. Only if you don't know. Put in the comment section right now who you think is going to win. Right now, because of the amount of people, I want to say Timur. But home field advantage, I want to say Bayezid. I'm gonna stick with Timur. Am I saying his name wrong? Timur. The guy with the T in his name.
The initial plan was to put pressure on Suleiman, where the ground was flatter and the Ottoman position more vulnerable to envelopment. Timur's nomadic riders on the right were the first to unleash a storm of arrows. Unnerved and taking losses, the Balkan troops nevertheless withstood the volleys. Shortly after, Shah Rukh's archers concentrated their volleys on Lazarevich's contingent. Most of the arrow fire was focused on the Serbian prince's banner, but the projectiles were ineffective against the heavily armoured troops. In the centre, confronted with waves of volleys unleashed by the Chagatai riders, the Ottoman foot archers withdrew onto the high ground behind the infantry and continued to respond with volleys of their own. Like thousands of hornets, Timurid archers swarmed in front of the static Ottoman line, looking for a weak spot. Riders rushed in, firing off their bows at nearly point-blank range, before circling back, only to be replaced by a new wave of swift-moving archers. After a while, commotion began in the Ottoman Azep ranks. For the Timurid archers, this was like sharks smelling blood. From experience, they knew that this part of the enemy line was feeling the pressure of the constant barrage.
I was about to say, I've never seen that kind of attack where, I've always seen them line up and just shoot at each other. I've never seen this and then just kind of fade away and the next one comes up. I don't know how common that is, but to me, it's a non-stop barrage. You can see it's starting to do some damage up here in the front. But to me, it's a non-stop barrage. And you can only sustain so much before you either force an attack or you break and run. That's my opinion. I have no military background, clearly.
On cue, all Timurid riders focused their arrows on the wavering Azep infantry, trying to either force them to flee or bait them into charging forward. But Bayezid commanded the men to hold the line, despite the casualties, demonstrating his strong leadership. He knew that by now the nomadic riders were low on arrows, and that the first wave was nearly over. Indeed, not long after, Timur's horse archers retreated, their quivers empty. They rode back towards the camps in the rear to replenish their ammo and get fresh horses, passing through the incoming wave of Timurid cavalry that switched from a trot to full gallop towards the enemy line.
This is a little bit shorter. I'm going to stop it here, going into the second wave, because I don't want to. Yeah, see it. They're going to actually start a battle itself, and I don't want to get into that part. I want that kind of a fresh thing. But we've got the opening. I wonder. Never mind. Stupid question. I was going to say, I wonder how many arrows were fired. Stupid question. Unless somebody could count all those arrows for me, then we'd know. What a dumb question. All right, well, I'm going to end this here. But we will be back for part 3, and that's the major battle. The big clash, as they say. But before we go, guys, we have to talk. Let's get right there. Let's just talk about how I can move the screen around. Isn't that great? Okay, we're going to go back over here. All right, until next time, have a good day, have a good night.